Welcome to Let's Chop It Up. Today we have guests here. We're going to continue on with some things that we've been talking about military life. Today we're going to talk about military life, but we're also what we're looking at today is from those that were parents were in the military and what their experience was as children, as members of a military family. So we're going to talk about that topic. Today I have Marissa, also have RaShon, who's our co-host, but also again he lived the military lifestyle as a dependent as well. And then we have Mr. Frazier, also Pito. So we'll have a conversation with them about what it was like for them to be a kid growing up in a military family. So as I introduce, I want to start off. We'll take the subject, we're going to take it to the table, and we're going to chop it up and we're going to go from there. So, any of our guests, do you have anything that you want to share about you and your time as a person in the military with your parents? Anything that jumps out that you want to share right away?
I'll go ahead. Greetings, everyone. I am Marissa Wells. Just off the bat, I would say that both my parents were in the military, in the Army to be specific. And I have a lot of family that was in the Army. And all my life, they would always joke that I was going to follow in their footsteps and go into the Army and do the same thing they did. And I was always fighting them on. I never thought that would be the lifestyle for me. But senior year of high school, I decided that's what I wanted to do. So I joined the ROTC program at my school, Florida A&M University in Tallahassee, Florida. And in about 4 months, I'll commission into the Army. I'll be a second lieutenant, and I'll start my career as an Army officer.
All right.
Nice.
All right. Yes. Great. Anybody else?
Well, for me, I came from a military background. My name is Pito. Grandfather was Navy. My dad, 23 years in the Army. The day he retired, it was the day of my enlistment and basic training in the Air Force. Um, Decided to go that a different route. Growing up in the Army or as an Army brat, got to see a lot of things that went on in the Army and found out that the Air Force does treat their people better. So I went that route as opposed to the Army. Um, and then a few years later, I got out. And then literally 1 year from the day that I got out, I was officially out. My wife went into the Army, so I've been a Army brat, a active duty Air Force, and a Army spouse. So
Oh
uh,
wow.
had a little bit of everything or from
All of
all
it.
aspects of it. So
Wow.
it's always
Right.
interesting.
Right. Rashawn, you want to
Right.
share anything?
Yeah. So, hey, everybody. Good to see you again. My name is RaShon. I'm the co-host. So, my dad, who's on my screen above me, was in the Army. 25 years. He retired when I was, I don't know, 19 or 20 years old. So, at 37, it's still really the main life that I know, being a Army brat and Army dependent. Um, I went a different route from the other guests. I didn't join the military. I went into the civilian world, but I did work as a army contractor and different things like that. So I didn't completely get away from it.
All right. So now there was something that I heard two of you say, and it's a common thing that we hear in the military. We hear people say military brat. Does that bother anybody? Because I know Pito, he said it like, "Hey, look, I've been an army brat." So is that a term that bothers anybody when you hear that army brat?
Uh, I can't say that was the case for me. That's the way we were known as. I was born in the 80s, overseas in Europe. I mean, it was something that they used over there. When we came back to the States, they used it. So it was just that term that they used to distinguish us from the other kids that we went to school with. And can't say it really made much of a difference.
Okay. Anybody
Yeah,
else?
it didn't bother me at all. I tell people I was an army brat. To me, is much better, and people understand it a lot more than saying I was a military dependent. That a lot of people are not, even though it sounds simple in what it is. Most people are not going to equate to what that is. It's the army brat, and that's quite fine with me. I mean, we were spoiled in some senses, so we were brats in some ways. So yeah, I'm fine with that.
Marissa, you have anything to say about that term?
I would just say I agree with everyone else. It never really bothered me. It was just kind of the way it was. I never thought it was anything negative. It was just the thing they called us.
Okay, all right. Now let me ask you something. All of you being children of military and such rich history of military that I'm hearing as well. Where RaShon, he had an uncle that was in the army. My stepfather was in the army, so there were other people in our family that was military and stuff as well. But the question that I have for you, when you were growing up, did you feel like your parents was treating you like you were one of their soldiers, that you were part of their platoon?
Oh man, that is a loaded question.
Well,
I
answer
think.
it. Answer it.
I mean, of course they did. Yeah, I mean, come on now. I To this day, I tell my kids when they say, "Oh, well, I almost," and I tell them, "Almost does not count unless it's horseshoes and hand grenades." When my kids look at me crazy, like, and one day they're going to go to school and say that, But there's other things when stuff go wrong and somebody tells me, "Oh, well, I was having a hard time," and I'll just instinctively say, "Well, sometimes you just gotta, suck it up and soldier on." I mean, those are all things that I learned from an army dad who treated us like little military soldiers, except for they loved us. The government didn't love you as a soldier, but as a being a army kid, you did it with love. I still talk to people like this because that's how we
Yes.
were pointed at. You know, so yeah, I think once I got out, once I moved to California away from the government, I think because I was so indoctrinated and treated like a mini soldier, I had a hard time adjusting to civilian life because I spoke to people like soldiers and different things like that. And I was in HR, and you can't really do that in civilian HR. So, yeah, I think, and I don't think it was purposeful or malicious, but when that is when that's what they're doing, 8, 10, 12 hours a day, it kind of translates into home because they know discipline, they know structure, they want their homes to run the same way. So for us, it was just, but I don't think it was looking back on it, it kind of went with the life, right? It went with being in the military because I went to a military high school. We lived on military installations. There was always structure. There was always regulations. There was always something. So to me, it just helped, with more of the assimilation of the life.
Anybody else want to add on to that? Little soldiers?
I would say for me, my parents were really good about not treating me like I was a soldier myself, and I think it was because I was always so adamant that that's not the life I wanted for myself. But I can remember a few times, I get picked up from school. I'm talking to my mom. Hey, mom, how was your day? And she's giving me a whole rundown using all of these
Acronyms.
acronyms and all of this army language, and I don't even say anything at this point. I just let her talk because if I ask her what everything means, the conversation will never progress. Um, but in terms of discipline and structure, that was definitely always there. I always knew what was going on. There was always, a tentative timeline for the day, what was going to get done, time hacks that we were going to meet. And that part of it I really do love because I feel like that's where I got my discipline and structure and time management skills from. So yes and no, I guess answers the question for me.
Okay, all right.
Uh,
Uh,
for
Pito?
me, definitely. My dad, very unique individual. I love him to death. But I mean, we would get in trouble for little things, and PT was like the number one punishment. Um, I mean,
Physical
he's quick to
training.
put us
You have to make sure
to
you
muscle
say,
failure on your back. Get him up. So 1, 2, 3, 1, and like that. Come on, what's going on? And I mean, that went on. Ooh, all of the '80s,
Years.
all of the '90s, um,
2000s.
2000s. I mean, even after I was out of the house and in college, and my dad was still um, on your back, and he had us lined up in order from youngest to oldest. And I mean, the getting fussed at was just no different than the soldiers. He's like, I got y'all in here like I got my dang on soldiers in here, and I got to tell them, and they acting like my kids. And going up to him because his um, last role was the NCOIC at the personnel control facility. So in high school, RaShon can tell you, we used to go up to his office, and we just be going up there for just the smallest things, maybe get some money or any of those little things. And his soldiers are getting fussed at, and somehow we are now a part of that fussing, and we're trying to figure out like, hey, we just came up here to get some money for lunch or do something, and now we're getting fussed at with your soldiers. And um, it was always something. I don't think he drew that line of distinguishing us from the soldiers, and especially like I said, as we got in high school and we were about the same age as most of his soldiers, it was really blurred, and it was, yeah, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, a hero, this and this and that. Look, we're not in the military, you can't treat us like this, it's child abuse. Who's your father? So it was very, very interesting growing up. And even for myself, when I was in and when my wife was in, it kind of got pushed down on my children. They're yes sir, no sir. We go to their parent teacher conferences, and their teachers are like, "Oh, they're the most politest children in the world. They say yes sir, no ma'am," things like that. And the other kids don't say that. So I was like, well, it's just how we were brought up. That was part of our upbringing. You don't say yes sir, no sir, you're in trouble. So they find that, and I found that I do instill that in my children as well. Um, in work, like RaShon said, trying to adjust from civilian or from military to civilian, it has been a big adjustment even now. Um, I've been I've had HR calling on me 2 or 3 times now, uh, because everybody is yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am, and they say, well, don't call me yes sir, don't call me no sir, don't say Mr. or Mrs., things like that. And I have to explain to them, this is a lifestyle that I've lived for 40 years. This is just, it's not something that you can just say, hey, and it goes away. This is how we were brought up. Everybody is given that respect until you have found a reason not to have it. So you're going to be yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Um, but it's just a big adjustment coming
Yeah.
from that military lifestyle to that civilian lifestyle. Um,
Yeah.
and if you don't have to do it, then you don't do it. Like I said, that's why my children are
Right.
are in that same role where they're yes sir, no sir, yes sir.
And it
So
is something that it takes some time. I mean, again, I've been part of the military in some shape or form since I was 17 years old. This has been my life for the last 43 years, and I'm still there. Looking to retire finally this year from the civilian side, as I've retired from the army. But it is something that it takes time to get away from, and I don't know. Of course, I'm not there yet. I'm still do a lot of things the way the military runs it, so it does take time. So fully understand what you're talking about, the adjustment to folk that are not used to being around the military. But RaShon, you was about to add something before I move on to our next question.
yeah, so what I was going to add some clarity. So for Marissa, any of the viewers or listeners, so me and Pito are, for all intents and purposes, purposes, we are brothers. I mean,
Yes.
I met Pito when I was in eighth grade, and we've always been inseparable since then. So we live diagonal from each other on base. So this is why I can understand what he means about his dad, because I was treated like one of his kids. So yeah. So just a little bit of clarity on that.
Yeah, and that's another subject that we're going to cross as well, dealing with military bonds and how they come together. But let me ask you this question: when you were as a military dependent or army brat or air force, whatever it may have been your service, how did you deal with, or did any of you have any time that your parents was either deep deployed, or I know like in RaShon's case, I didn't do any deployments while he was growing up, but I spent a lot of time away with the military. Did any of you have to experience any deployments or your parents being away for extended period of time? And if you did, how did you deal with that?
Go ahead, Miss
I
Marissa.
would,
Oh,
yeah, go, Marissa.
I was just gonna say, fortunately, I never experienced my parents being away from me for too long. I did grow up primarily with my mom. You know, I saw my dad all the time, but I didn't live with him. And by the time I was born, he had already retired from the army, so it was never a matter of I can't see him because he's doing army things. And my mom was always really good about navigating around the army because somehow we only moved 2 times, and she never deployed while I was coming up. So thankfully, I never experienced that.
RaShon or Pito?
well, for me, my dad, he did deploy. If he wasn't gone to the fields growing up, then he was deployed. Um, in particular, I remember he had went off to NTC. This was just before Operation Desert Storm. He had went off to NTC and he was gone for about 9 months. And then as soon as he got back, he was literally home maybe a week or two before everything kicked off with Saddam Hussein. And he got the call and said, "Hey, Sergeant Frazier, pack your stuff and head over to the gym." And he went. Uh, Being that he was NCO, he had the leeway of coming back home while they were prepping. But they left and they were gone for about 13 months, 13, 14 months, I want to say. Um, but that was a little bit difficult on us, having my dad gone to Operation Desert Storm, not knowing what was going on, all the news coverage of them showing the events and stuff that was going on. For anybody, that was a real big one. Um, Growing up wise, I remember President Bush came to the base while they were deployed, and he had a little conference or whatever he was doing on the base. But like, no matter what he said, it just didn't matter. Fact of the matter was, my dad was gone, and we didn't truly understand what was going on or why. Um, and then when he did come back, he doesn't really go into details about what's going on. They have their little stories about what happened over there, but they don't really go into detail. Um, and I can understand that from his standpoint. There's a lot of things you just don't want to touch. And then I remember him also going to Korea. That was just before we moved to Fort Stewart, and he was gone for a year. And that was really tough. I was 15, 16 at the time while he was gone. And, honestly, I didn't want to be home with a bunch of girls. My brother had graduated. He was off at college, and it was just me, my mom, my aunt, and her daughter had came down to stay for a little while, and I didn't want to be in the house with a bunch of girls. I wanted to go to Korea and be with my dad. So that was probably a very rough time for me. And even just thinking about with my children, my wife, she didn't deploy. She has went off to schools and things of that nature where we've had some difficulties. Um, and I can see that it has affected my children with her, having gone off to school and being away in the way they view things. So theirs is a little bit different than ours. I think with them, they have a little bit of abandonment issues due to that. We had a lot of stuff going on, as I stated. So I think that resulted in some abandonment issues. But for us, it was, can't really say abandonment. It was just more so growing up not understanding why he was gone. And then when he came back, everything was good. We picked up where we left off, and you know, it was good, great. So
Okay.
can't really complain.
So, but during that time, um, how did I know you said your mom, your sister, they came and they stepped in, but how did even though he was going like the first time Desert Storm, then he was going to Korea, even though you couldn't go to Korea, how did you deal with it? Was there something in particular that you did? Did you do things to occupy your time until
Uh,
he returned, or how did you actually just handle it?
I don't think we really did anything. We just kind of
You get used to
lived.
it.
And I mean,
Yeah.
you just yeah, you just sit there and you do everything as normal as possible. Um, and just try to make it a everyday until they get
Yeah.
back. And
Yeah.
you get to talk to them here and there. It's can't say that it's enough, but you just try to make things as normal as
Right.
possible.
Okay.
Right.
RaShon, you was gonna add
Yeah.
something?
Yeah. I mean, you do. You kind of get used to it in the sense that this is normalcy. This is life. Like you didn't deploy when I was young. You did all your deployments before I was born. But with the job you had, you were gone. 9 months out of the year, just about. Uh, it was not all at one time. It was 2 weeks here or 3 weeks here or 2 months here. So I remember you eventually you just it's the life, especially when you're in a military school or on a military installation when you're not the only kid whose parent is away. You kind of get, I think, desensitized to it in a way that you think this is normal. But I think the things that it does do is that, you and I have talked about how, you know, we really didn't develop a strong relationship until after you retired because you were gone so much. It was hard to really build that bond. um, I won't say a bond. It was hard to build a real strong relationship because you were gone so much, and each time you come back, I'm in a whole different phase of my life. you
Yeah.
know and I remember, like, when I was learning to drive, you were heavily traveling, and Pito is actually the one who taught me how to drive because you were traveling. I think as kids, you get some resentment when you're in it, but then when you're an adult, such as myself, you look back and you say that was their career,
Right.
that was their life.
Yeah.
So
It-
hindsight, you look at it and say, but as kids, you do have some resentment because you miss key events and things like that. We have friends whose parent missed their graduation, or for me, I remember waiting for you for my 16th birthday, but you got a call and you had to hop on the plane and you were gone.
yeah.
So that's just
Yeah,
you
I
know
mean it's and for during that time, especially for as you're talking about it now, most of my traveling when I was going, like you said, 6 to 9 months out of the year was when you were in high school. So
hmm
that is the time when for him, he was, you got all these events coming up, and most of them I missed. And it's funny as a parent, sometimes and even today I'll sit around and they'll be talking about something and I'll be like, I don't remember that. And they'll be like, well, Dad, you were TDY, which is temporary duty. You were signed, you were somewhere else. And they don't do it like to poke me in the eye or something like that, but it's like, oh man, I missed that. But that goes back to where we also talked about others stepping up in the military, other families, how the bonds that are created between people that are in the military, the kids and things like that, those bonds kind of help you carry you through these things because you're dealing with everybody else that have these same situations or been in that situation. So even as young kids, you're probably dealing with somebody, another teenager who parent has been deployed, so you lean on those, so I believe that's how a lot of times that you guys carry through some of these times that the parents are absent and things like that. And again, I know that in our household, your mom made up a lot of time when and I had people that was in our church that would step up. Like when my wife got a flat tire, one of my friends was like, hey, this is a good opportunity to train the boys how to change a flat tire. I wasn't there. I was in Puerto Rico for a month, so they couldn't sit there and wait for a month for the tire to get changed. So, you know, so other people would step up. So those things, I'm glad that, part of the military family is that you do have those other ones that will step in, that will step up and they begin to help you through that. So I asked you about
And
the
not to cut you off, Mr. Carwell, but I think that's what made it so easy for us when we were in high school going through it. When you're younger, you just don't really understand. As in high
right.
school, you have those friends, those brothers, sisters that you have that connection with that makes it easy because their parents are gone. So you find other ways to, I guess, direct that anger or the resentment of your parents being gone. And I mean, at points in time, I remember my dad, we used to go um, to little TDYs for funeral detail. That was like a reprieve from us. Like we were like, yeah, dad's gone. You know, let's get together, let's hang out. You know, we don't have anybody over our shoulder. So we
Right.
found ways to cope with it. And I don't think if we didn't have each other, I think we would have fallen apart. But being that
Yeah.
we did have each other like that, we were
Right.
family. And it,
Yeah.
it made up for a lot of the things
Yeah.
when you
And that's
guys were
Right.
not there.
yeah.
But on the flip side, it is for me, it was an adjustment after you retired when you were there, because there were times when I was just like, can you re-enlist? Like, what I I, I am trying to sneak out to go to Walmart. How did you hear me? And why are you going with me?
Mhm.
So, you know, the afterwards is an adjustment too of the retirement portion.
Yeah, because I
um,
know, as you said that, I know it was hard for them when I did leave the uniform, because one of the things in my job was always about attention to detail. So I had to learn a lot. I had to pay attention to a lot of different things, and I was an investigator for a while. So they know I would come home if something was going on. It was an interrogation on, and there was times that they would be and I used to mess with. I would do stuff just to make them confess to something they never did. And my wife used to tell me, "Stop doing that to them." So it just became one of those things that you mess around with them, and but it was all out of love.
it was
One
a
of the
good
things
life.
that, yeah,
Yes.
one of the things for them that I used to do whenever I traveled and I was gone, no matter where I was at, I always made sure I brought them something back from wherever I was at. That was part of my little thing that I would do for them, is making sure that wherever I travel, hey, look, I was thinking about you while I was gone, and it was because of the way that I travel. I wasn't in a combat zone. I was always in the United States. I was always somewhere where I could do stuff like that. So each parent does things differently. Some may spend time once they get back. So it's just different things that each person will do. So last question that I do want to ask, and I know Marissa, you touched on it some, where you said that your family was saying you're going to follow this lifestyle and things like that. So Peter was like, so is did your parents and I know RaShon, you talked about a little bit of it, because I know for me as a parent, I never tried to, and as a former recruiter, I always wanted to be my children's decision to go into the military. And of the five, none of my five went in. But it wasn't because, I just told them don't join or anything. I wanted that to be their decision. So for Marissa and Pito, did your parents, Marissa covered some of it, but did your parents influence you to say you need to go into the military? This is a good thing, or what happened? Because you both went in.
Before you answer, though, Marissa, I think this is an important question to ask, because raise your hand as an Army brat if someone out in the world has ever said, "Did your parents make you join?"
Oh, yes,
So
definitely.
this is this is a very important question for you to ask.
Yeah. It was never like that for me. And of course everyone assumes that, but when I kind of tell them the story, they're like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense." Um, but no, my parents, they were when I got to a certain age, they were like, "You're about to be an adult. We can't make these big life decisions for you." So like in terms of colleges, they were like, "I would like you to go here, but you can go wherever you want." And that's kind of like the same thing for the military. Like, I would like you to be in this club organization in college, but I can't make you do anything. So when I came home just randomly and told them, "Yeah, I'm gonna join ROTC. I'm gonna join the army," they were just like, "What happened?" Like, it's just a whole 180. And I kind of explained it to them, and they're like, "Well, that's a good plan. You sound like you're invested in it. I know you're gonna do great in it." And they were happy for me, but it was never like if I called them and say, "Hey, I didn't get up and go to PT or physical training this morning because I was too tired." It was never like well, make sure you do that. Like, this is gonna happen if you don't. They were really supportive throughout the whole process. They understood everything I was going through, and now they're just happy that I'm gonna be in the big army and actually start executing.
Oh, good, good.
Yeah.
Pito?
Well, for me, my dad, like you're like yourself. He was in the recruiting command, and he was very adamant that we didn't join. That was a very big thing, even with the
Yeah.
ASVAB. Um, Being that we went to DoD high schools, they made it seem like it was mandatory that you had to take the ASVAB, and that was something that y'all was like, y'all are telling our children what? They don't have to take this test. And it was a big thing when y'all went up to the school and y'all fussed about it. But he was really adamant when I originally was going to go in after high school. I was going to go in the Army, and it got all the way up to the point of the day that I was supposed to ship because we had gotten in an argument, a disagreement. I was going to go to college first, and then him and I had gotten in a disagreement over something stupid as a tongue piercing. And it was like, okay, well,
I
you're
remember
not gonna
that.
do this in my house. So I was like, okay, then I'll go in the military. And then the day that I was supposed to ship, he was like, "Are you sure you want to do this? Because I'm still saying no." And I was like, "Okay, fine. I'm gonna go ahead and listen to him." And sure enough, when the recruiter showed up to the door, the recruiter was like, "Well, yeah, you have to go down to maps. You gotta, clear everything out." And my dad was like, "Who are you trying to fool? I work right over there at USAREC. Don't tell me what has to happen." So he sent the recruiter packing, and he left on. And then go figure, a couple of years later, matter of fact, the same year that RaShon and them graduated, that fall, I ended up enlisting in the Air Force. My brother-in-law, he was wanting to go in because he didn't have very many options. So he wanted to go in. And he said, "Hey, let's do the buddy program and let's go ahead and go in the Air Force." Um, we go down there. We take the ASVAB. I pass. He doesn't. So I was like, I'm already signed up now. Let me go ahead and short ship. And then he ended up passing and going into the Army the following year. But we really didn't. Well, I speak for myself. Me and my siblings, there was no pressure for us to join. It was actually in the opposite direction. I don't want you to go in.
Right.
But if you do go in, then go Air Force because they treat their people better. And it
Right.
was the same thing with my wife, who was um, he had the same conversation with her. I prefer you to go in the Air Force if you're going to join, do Air Force and Navy, just because of the difference in the way they treat their people.
Well,
Um,
it's everybody that and again, I never tried to influence my kids one way or another, whether they win it or not. And whichever, and I used to always tell them, if you decide to go in whatever branch you go into, I support you on whatever you do. Um, and so
I
they
do.
were.
I do remember you stopped me though when I was 17, and for good reason though. Remember, I wanted to join, and you told me no because I had several scholarship offers to go to college, and I
Of
said, "Well, I'm
course.
gonna, yeah." So, I said, "Well, I'm gonna join anyway," and you were like, first off, you're 17. I have to sign. I'm not going to sign for it. You have many opportunities to go to college. You went into the military because that was to get you out of the
Philadelphia.
to get out of the streets of Philadelphia. My situation was different. You were, go to college. I'm not going to have you join. And you were like, I work at the recruiting command, so good luck. And but I went off to college, and I'm glad I listened. So it wasn't like you told me I couldn't join, or you kind of more or less just steered me in a different direction and said, look, if you really want to go, that's fine, but you have these other options. Try these out first, and if it doesn't work, I'll take you down there myself. So
Yeah.
and I think that's the big thing. Very few
yeah,
people realize that your parents, very few of them actually want you to go in. They're like,
right.
I have did my service enough for my entire family. Y'all should not have to go in. Um, and
And
you,
it varies from family to family because there are some families that is traditional, that's what they do. So it varies from, because I've had other family members and other soldiers that I was stationed with where that's just something they do. I mean, but it varies from family to family. I'm not going to say that all of us say that we don't want them to go on or we want them to go. It just varies from family to family on how they will follow that. And again, I'm glad that the time served that I did. I'm glad that my children had the experience, the times that they've experienced with the military. But it was something that they have to make that decision on. If this, because they lived a life, and as you all lived a life, is something that you will have, and all of you that have children now, one day you may be having this same conversation with them because you've experienced military. And Pito, you've been from dependent to Air Force to dependent as a husband, and so you got all these different things. And then Marissa, she's going to be commissioned as an officer. So, but eventually, one day, all of you, because like RaShon, of course, you have three, they're all young, but one day you may have this conversation with your own kids, but your experience with the military may have some influence on how you direct them based on your own experiences that you've had. Some of
Yep.
you,
Right.
you might say, hey, look, depending on, like in RaShon's case, look, you have these scholarship opportunities, follow the scholarships if they decide that they want to go into the military. But one thing I do know for sure, whichever way your kids will go, you'll be supportive or however they go.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just believe that just because of your experience, you will be supportive if they decide that they want to go. It might be something I don't want you to go, but if they make that decision on their own, you'll still support because you've been
Yeah.
there before.
Yeah, and it was a good life. It really is. Even with, the ups and downs of parents being gone or moving around and new friends, every, you know, short stint of friends and things like that. It was a good life. And
It
I
really
would
was.
never, yeah, I would never take away from that. It was a good life. The experience that we had as dependents, as I see with my civilian people, it gave us a whole different worldview. It exposed us to different cultures, to,
Mm,
being open minded, to eating different foods or experiencing different cultures, or being friends with everyone, or the traveling. I think a lot of that I attribute to being a military dependent, because we were so different. It was different in a good life.
correct.
So before we close out, because we're about to close out now, is it any for any dependents or military brats out there that may be struggling? Is there some words of encouragement that you all, anybody that could give those ones that may happen to listen to you? What are some of the things that you can tell them that may encourage them as they're going through some of the things that you've all been through?
Make the most of it. You know, there are things that you can do to make the most of it. Build your bonds. Think about it this way. Pito and I have known each other since I was in eighth grade. I think he was a sophomore. He's been all around, the world. I've been all around the country, but we always stayed, brothers. And you always have somewhere to visit somebody. I have friends overseas. I have friends all over the country. There's probably nowhere I can't go where I don't know someone who was in the military. So make the most of it. Make it your own adventure, because it really can be.
Anybody else?
I would
Good.
have to agree. I'm sorry. I would have to agree with Rashawn. We've traveled the world. We've seen things that most children do not get to see. Um, and I know with my children, they're really big on iPads and Nintendos, and they're not really go outside type children. For any children that are going through this, if you're a military child, get out, enjoy, experience. Um, the outdoors, experience the life that's around you. That's one of the memories that you're not going to get back. Um,
Hmm.
being able to embrace those different cultures, those different peoples, learning how they live. It's a real eye opener, um, especially in today's world when, let's be honest, being tolerant of other people's views and things like that is not something that is embraced. So this does allow you to be able to understand and see other people's views. Um, more than what you would if you did not have the opportunity. Most of our family typically they stay in the same city, same state their entire lives, so they don't get that experience that you will get being able to travel the world and being an army brat or whatever brat that you are. So do like I said, embrace it, enjoy it, um, try to be a part of as much as you can, wherever you're stationed, wherever you are in the world. Just try to be as much of a part of that experience as you can and take it with you because it does go a long way when you do get older.
Marissa, anything you want to add?
I would say it's gonna kind of sound cliche, but like whatever doesn't kill you is definitely gonna make you stronger in the end. Like I know in the moment it might suck, losing friends every 3 years or moving every 3 years and kind of feeling like your life has no stability, but in the end it's gonna pay off. I promise. You're gonna be so squared away. You might seem a little different from your peers, but it's just gonna help you be successful in the future.
All right. All right. Well, I'd like to thank you all for being here today. Just your insight for this topic, being a child of a military parents, to be able to share your views with others. Just want to thank you all. Marissa, early congratulations on your commissioning.
Thank
We
you.
wish you the very best as you enter into the active army, and we pray that you will, make all of us proud as you step up and do the things that some of us have done. Um, and I know for you, you have with your parents being in, you have a different view from the dependent side. So all that will come together as you lead soldiers. And I'm glad to have you on, and RaShon and Pito, you guys, your experience. We thank you for sharing that with us today. And we look forward if we can tag you all for something else. If another topic comes up, we'll tag you all in it and look forward to talking to you.